Welcome to Dark Verse. I'm Isaac Nightshade. Tonight's story is Midnight Warnings. When the clock ticks at midnight, it's not keeping time. It's remembering. Evan Bryce returns to his childhood motel, expecting silence and grief. But something else has been waiting. Something that breathes behind the walls. Something that knocks when you're almost asleep. He tries to stay awake, but memory is a trap, and the past is ticking. Midnight warnings. You're not just listening, you're already remembering. Chapter 1. The clock in room 217. Evan Bryce had never intended to come back to Grayer's Hollow. He had buried it the way one might bury a dead pet in the woods, hastily, unceremoniously, and with just enough dirt to avoid the smell. But time, as it often does, finds ways to rot through even the best sealed things. His father's death, unexpected, unspectacular, was the thing that pulled him back. The town looked smaller now. Or maybe it had. Always looked this way, like a miniature model of something real. The trees were still too thin. The gas station still blinked a tired, open sign behind bug-smeared glass. And the motel, the Hollow Haven Inn, sagged at the edges like something warping under invisible weight. Evan pulled into the gravel lot. Dust licked up over the hood of the rental car, catching in the golden teeth of late afternoon sun. The O in Hollow had fallen off. It dangled now, a rusted charm on a chain of filament. He stared at the building for a long time before getting out. He wasn't sure if he expected someone to come out and greet him. His father, maybe, impossibly. Or himself. A younger version. The one who used to run barefoot down the corridor outside room 217, pretending to be chased. That was before everything went wrong. Before the silence between him and his father thickened into something more enduring than memory. Inside, the air was heavier than he remembered. Stale, but not unpleasant. Like sun-baked wood and forgotten linens. He moved through the front office. It hadn't changed. The bell on the counter, the dusty keys hanging behind thick glass. The wall calendar still turned to October 2019. A small folded note had been left for him beside a single key labeled 217. All yours. Will call Monday. Tess. He didn't remember who Tess was. Maybe one of the women his father had hired to keep things running after Evan's mother left, or vanished, or broke. The details blurred like a dream you only half wanted to remember. The key felt too cold in his hand. Room 217 sat at the far end of the top floor, a corner room with a half view of the forest. The carpeted hallways muffled his steps. A lone water stain on the ceiling above the room's door reached outward like a bloom of moldy coral. The door opened stiffly, dragging against swollen frame wood. Inside, the room was frozen in time. A queen bed with the same floral coverlet from decades ago. A box TV, laminate dresser, beige everything. But Evan's attention locked immediately on the wall opposite the bed. A clock. It was analog, round, and mounted high, just below the ceiling trim. Yellowed plastic. No branding. The kind of cheap thing you'd find in an elementary school hallway. He couldn't recall it being there before. The second hand ticked. Loudly. He stepped closer, holding his breath. The sound was oddly sharp. Staccato. Each click landed like the cracking of a knuckle. He stood on the edge of the bed and removed the clock carefully from its mount. It was light. The back was bare. No battery. No place for one. Evan stared at it, heart crawling up his throat. Tick. The hand still moved, once every second, metronomic. Unfazed by the impossible, he set it on the desk, backward, face down. It ticked louder. That night, sleep came in tatters. He dreamed of narrow corridors and clocks without faces. He wandered a version of the motel rearranged like a funhouse, every room a mirror of the next. No doors, only walls that pulsed as if breathing. When he woke, it was precisely midnight. The clock, somehow back on the wall, chimed once. Not a pleasant chime, not musical, a sound that scraped, like steel dragged across enamel. He sat up, heart pounding, neck slick with sweat. His breath came uneven, like he'd been running. It was darker than it should have been. The moon hidden, the trees beyond the window, indistinct and looming. He stared at the clock. One chime, one sound, then silence. He tried to rationalize. A wind-up mechanism? A malfunctioning wall unit with some kind of backup motor? He could check in the morning. He was just tired. The day had been long, the town disorienting. Grief made everything strange. He lay back down but kept his eyes open, listening, counting each second. Tick, tick, tick. Eventually, the sound melded into the rhythm of his heartbeat. The morning came slow and gray. He felt as though he'd barely slept, his limbs heavy with some sediment of the dream that hadn't yet left him. He showered, dressed, stepped out into the hallway and immediately smelled something faintly sweet, like rotting oranges. By the time he got outside, it was gone. He made his way to the main office looking for coffee. He passed room 219, where the hollow space between the floorboards always used to creak. It didn't now. That was somehow worse. The office was empty, the pot long cold. He poured a cup anyway and drank it without cream. A newspaper on the counter dated back 2 weeks. The headline was about a chemical fire in a neighboring county. The image showed something scorched and blackened. Back in 217, he found the clock had stopped. 11:59. He stared. It didn't tick, didn't move. He waited a full minute. Nothing. Only then did he notice the mirror. Above the dresser, slightly warped with age, he could see his reflection, a blur barely held together. But near the center, just above the glass knob on the drawer, was something else. A handprint. Not outside. Inside. Palm flat, fingers slightly spread. Delicate. Child-sized, but distorted, as if made from something wet and thick, like condensation or blood. He stepped closer. The edges of the handprint were imperfect, smudged. A single drip had run down from the ring finger like a teardrop. He touched the glass. It was cold. He stood there, motionless, unsure what he was feeling. Fear, yes, but beneath that, recognition, familiarity, like this moment had already happened before. Maybe many times. He looked again at the handprint, and it changed, just slightly. The fingers curled inward, barely noticeable, but enough. He gasped, stumbling backward, catching his hip on the corner of the dresser. The impact sent a dull ache up his side. He turned to the bed, to the clock. It now read 12 o'clock, and it was ticking again. The second hand jerked forward once, then again in rapid succession. Tick, 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 tick. Then silence. He stared at the mirror. The handprint was gone, not faded. Gone. But when he looked down at the palm of his own hand, he found it was wet. Something slick coated his fingers. He sniffed it. Copper. Chapter 2. The Town That Forgot to Die. The air outside tasted of metal and pine, with a thickness that clung to Evan's clothes. Morning in Grayer's Hollow had always felt half-lit, as if the sun here took longer to rise, reluctant to cast light on a town that refused to change. Evan stepped off the motel porch and felt the gravel crunch beneath his shoes like bones breaking in miniature. He had forgotten that sound, but it greeted him like an old friend who never left, only waited. The street was quiet, unnaturally so. No engines, no birds, just the wind dragging itself along sagging awnings and brittle power lines. The town looked like it had been preserved in amber. Same stores, same signs, the same rust on the hinges of the diner's door. Evan remembered coming here with his father, sitting in the corner booth with a chocolate milkshake and a grilled cheese, the kind that always burned the roof of his mouth. He remembered the way the waitress used to call him Sugar, and how his mother had once sat across from him, eyes darting, smiling too hard. That was before her voice started to crack around the edges. He paused outside the diner now. Its windows were fogged at the corners, edges browned with age. He could see shadows moving within, slow and deliberate. The doorbell jingled as he stepped inside. The warmth was immediate, and so was the hush. Conversations stopped. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Coffee cups froze just inches from lips. Evan felt it in his stomach, a pulling like gravity had twisted slightly sideways. He offered a thin smile. "Morning?" No one responded, but eyes followed him. Not hostile, not kind either. Something in between. The way people look at a man who has returned from someplace he wasn't supposed to survive. Evan took a seat at the counter. The plastic stool groaned beneath him, protesting the weight of his intrusion. A woman shuffled out from the kitchen. Tall, 60s maybe, wearing an apron the color of old cream. Her name tag read Betty, though it was cracked and nearly illegible. She poured coffee without asking. The smell was acrid, like over-roasted beans and scorched metal. He took it anyway. "I used to come here," he said. She nodded, eyes not quite meeting his. "Room 217, he added, trying to sound casual. The clatter of silverware in the back corner stopped again. Betty's face twitched. Her lips parted slightly, as if she'd just tasted something sour. Then she leaned in close, breath warm with cigarettes and something faintly sweet. Licorice, maybe. "Don't sleep past the third warning," she whispered. Evan blinked. "What?" But she had already turned, disappearing into the kitchen, the swinging doors flapping once, then still. He sat there, the coffee cooling in his hands. No one looked at him now, not directly, but he could feel it. That weight, the unblinking attention of people who knew something they would never say aloud. He left a 5 on the counter and stepped outside into the late morning chill. The sun had risen, but only just, low and distant, like it regretted the decision. Evan wandered without direction, letting the streets guide him. They curved in familiar ways, past the elementary school with the cracked mural of children holding hands, one of them missing a head now, past the pharmacy with the faded sundown special sign that always hung crooked even back then. Time here had softened but not erased. He began to notice them. Faces, the same people. Old, yes, but not older, not in the way they should be. There was Mr. Lutz, who used to yell at kids for cutting across his lawn, still sitting in his same porch chair, drinking something amber from a thermos, still wearing that frayed ball cap. Evan had seen him do the exact same thing 20 years ago. And Marla, the blind woman who sold quilted potholders outside the library. She looked exactly the same clouded eyes, same scarf, same twitch of her fingers like she was always counting. Evan's stomach turned. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe the mind filled in blanks to soothe unease. But still, the town hadn't changed. Not like it should have. He made his way back to the motel in the late afternoon. the sun already dipping behind the hills, lengthening shadows until they felt almost like liquid, stretching too far, reaching where they shouldn't. As he walked down the hallway toward room 217, something about the walls seemed different, warped slightly, bowing inward in a way that made him think of lungs filling with air, breathing, slowly, patiently. He stepped inside the room and felt the cold settle over him like a second skin. The clock was still there, still ticking. The time, 11:58. He frowned. That couldn't be right. It was only 5:30. The sun hadn't even set completely. He pulled out his phone. The screen was black, dead. He could have sworn it had been fully charged. He stood in the center of the room, listening. The tick-tick-tick filled the space like an incantation. Steady, intentional, each one louder than the last. He moved to the mirror. No handprint, but something else. His reflection. It lagged, a fraction of a second behind. He tilted his head, so did the reflection, but too slow, too smooth. A soft noise behind him. Chime. 1. His breath caught. Chime. 2. Not the same scraping sound from before. This time it was deeper, rounder, more resonant, like a voice trying to speak without words. He turned slowly toward the clock. The second hand had stopped. 12 o'clock. Again. And then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. And in that moment of darkness, Evan saw something standing in the corner. Not clearly. Just the impression of a figure. Thin. Wrong. Facing the mirror. Not him. When the light returned, the room was empty, except for Evan, and the reflection, which was now smiling. Chapter 3. Static in the Walls. Nights were longer at Hollow Haven, not just in time, but in feeling, dilated, stretched, distorted, the kind of long that made hours lose shape, that made minutes curl in on themselves. Evan didn't sleep anymore, not really. He lay down, yes, closed his eyes. But sleep was shallow, fragmentary, like wading knee-deep into water that never quite swallowed him. A surface tension held him in place. He drifted, half dreaming, half listening. The motel had a voice, or maybe not a voice exactly, a presence. Evan began to think of it as breathing, not metaphorically, not figuratively, literally breathing. The walls seemed to expand and contract at odd intervals. The air shifted without explanation. The old heating vents released sounds that didn't match any function. And then there was the scratching. At first, he had thought it was mice. Logical. He'd grown up here. He knew there had always been rodents in the walls. They scurried at night, nested under floorboards. His father used to set traps with peanut butter lids and paper towels. But this was something else, slower, rhythmic, less of a scurry and more of a search. Not random, not desperate, deliberate. The sound came from behind the wallpaper, just above the headboard. It started around midnight and lasted until the early hours, always in that same patch of wall. He tried knocking once, lightly with his knuckles. The scratching stopped for about 30 seconds, then resumed, louder. The power flickered for the first time on the fourth night. A soft buzz, a pop, and then sudden darkness. The kind of dark that felt more complete than the absence of light. Evan stood in it, heart working hard in his chest, hands pressed to his sides. Then the radio came on. He hadn't touched the radio since he arrived, hadn't even noticed it before. It sat, old and cracked, on the dresser beside the clock. Not digital, not modern. A dial tuner, dusty with time. But it was on now, and it was playing something, a song, not quite music, warped and whispery. The melody struggled to hold itself together like it had been soaked in water, wrung out, and left in the sun too long. And it was familiar. His mother had sung it, a lullaby. He could barely remember the words, only fragments remained, frayed and nonsensical. Close your eyes, the stars are near. Lay your head and never fear. The words folded over themselves, repeated, slowed, played backward, then forward again. Evan reached for the radio, but before he touched it, the song cut off. Abruptly, the dial spun itself once, lazily. Then silence. He stepped back, chest heaving. Every instinct in him screamed to leave. But he didn't. Not out of courage. Something else. A weight pressing from behind. An obligation. He sat on the edge of the bed and listened. That was when he heard it again. The scratching. Now louder. Closer. Urgent. He turned toward the headboard and stared at the stretch of wallpaper, yellowed with age, slightly peeling at the corners. The pattern was a weak floral, the kind that looked like it was trying not to be noticed. The scratching paused, then resumed. Evan stood, heart hammering against his ribs, and moved to the wall. He pressed his ear to it. The sound vibrated through the sheetrock, slow and methodical. Not fingernails, not claws, knuckles, something knocking from the inside. He stepped back, looked around the room, disoriented by the silence between each knock. Then, suddenly, with a surge of frustration that felt more like fear, he grabbed the edge of the wallpaper and tore. It peeled in uneven strips, brittle and reluctant. Beneath it, the drywall was cracked, stained. And there, wedged between beams, hidden behind a thin sheet of loose plaster, was paper, a folded sheet, a child's drawing. He pulled it out slowly, carefully. It was done in crayon, faded but intact. A house, clearly the motel, with a single-room window glowing yellow. Stick figures, a tall one, his father, a smaller one, him. A woman off to the side, smiling, and something in the upper corner, roughly scribbled in dark gray with no clear form. Just a shadow with long arms and what looked like a single, enormous eye. At the bottom of the page, Evan Bryce, age 6, dated August 1997. His mouth went dry. He didn't remember drawing it. Not vaguely, not at all. And yet the handwriting was his, not the careful print of a child learning letters. The looped B in Bryce, the way the E started too wide. All of it exactly how he wrote his name now. But the date didn't make sense. He would have been 8 in 1997, not 6. And he'd never drawn like this. Never remembered his mother smiling like that. He studied the shadow again. The shape unsettled him, not because of what it was, but because of what it wasn't. It had no defined outline, just a presence, a wrongness that seemed to move the longer he looked at it. Behind him, the radio clicked on again. Static. Just that. Low, gritty static. But not uniform, not white noise. There were words in it, hidden, muffled. He was here, still, sleeping. He turned it off with a shaking hand. Then the lights flickered. Again, once, twice, then steadied. The room felt tighter somehow, smaller. The air thick with electricity and something older. Mold. Memory. Evan sat down, still clutching the drawing. He stared at the image of his mother, her mouth drawn in a perfect curve, but when he looked closer, her eyes were wrong. Just empty circles, no pupils, open, too wide. And he placed the drawing on the nightstand and stood to get water. But something stopped him. A new sound, not scratching, whispering, coming from the vent beneath the window. He crept toward it, compelled by some awful gravity, knelt, pressed his ear to the vent grate. The voice was low, garbled, like someone trying to speak through cloth. Don't let him wake up. Not yet. Not yet. He jerked back, knocking over the chair. Silence again. The drawing now lay on the floor, face down. He picked it up and gasped. It was different. The window in the motel now showed 2 figures. Not one, the tall one, and a second beside him, a child. Their faces were blank, and beneath the drawing now, in the same handwriting, was a new line. "He remembers you." Evan stumbled back, heart stuttering. He reached for the wall to steady himself, and that was when he heard it, a voice behind the wall. Soft, familiar. His mother's, singing. Just 3 words. Don't look away. Chapter 4. The Basement Door. The motel had a laundry room at the end of the hall, tucked behind a door with a tarnished brass knob and a small glass window painted over long ago. Evan didn't remember using it growing up. His father had done the washing. Sheets, towels, uniforms, all bleached, always bleached. There had been rules. He hadn't intended to go inside, but something, not quite a thought, not quite a voice, nudged him toward it on the second morning. A pull, subtle but persistent, like gravity redirected. The door groaned open. Inside, the air was colder, different cold, not the kind that came from broken insulation or old vents, a heavy kind, a presence. The floor was concrete, the walls unfinished, damp in places. A single fluorescent bulb hummed above, flickering like a dying thought. Washer, dryer, shelf of folded linens, yellowing at the edges, and something else. A seam in the floor he hadn't noticed before. A trapdoor, about 3 feet square, metal-rimmed, flush with the concrete, but there, definitely, undeniably there. He crouched beside it, ran his fingers over the edge, dust-free, clean. It hadn't been there yesterday. He was sure of it. No handle, no latch, just a seam. Evan stared at it for a long time, a discomfort blooming in the pit of his stomach. Then he stood, closed the door to the laundry room behind him, locked it, and walked away. That night he dreamt in fragments. The dream didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a memory, but translated, misremembered. He was a child again, in bed, in the motel. The shadows on the walls moved too slowly. They didn't match the trees outside. Someone was at the foot of the bed, tall, still. His father, but older than Evan remembered. Grayer, eyes deeper set. Not angry. Not warm either. Just present. He spoke without moving his mouth. One more left. Then Evan's eyes opened, and he was no longer a boy, and the room was still dark, and the clock on the wall chimed once. He sat up, heart racing. Twice. He clenched the bedsheet. 3 times. The sound didn't scrape like before. It resonated deeper, not just in the room, in him. When the echo faded, Evan noticed something else. The hallway beyond the door glowed faintly, as if someone had walked through just moments ago. Each morning, the mirrors in the hallway were fogged, just slightly. A faint haze centered, as if someone had leaned in, breathed out, and then stepped back. He wiped one with his sleeve, cleaned it. Minutes later, it fogged again. He stopped wiping them. There was no point. On the 3rd night, he didn't sleep. Not deeply. He stayed fully clothed, back propped against the headboard, eyes fixed on the door. He watched the room darken inch by inch. The clock above him whispered in its metronomic voice, tick, tick, tick. Then 3 chimes, and a sound from somewhere below. A creak. Not the floor. The trap door. It opened. He didn't want to go. Every part of him recoiled. His body told him no, but something quieter inside said you already did. He made his way to the laundry room. Slowly. Every step hesitant, like walking into the dark mouth of something patient. The laundry room light flickered to life before he touched the switch. The air had changed again. Wetter. And now tinged with something. Sharp. Metal, maybe. Or rot. The trapdoor was ajar, a black sliver of space beneath it. No stairs visible, just depth. Evan stood over it. It was warm down there. Not a comforting warmth, a living warmth. Breathing up at him, inviting, but in the same way an open grave invites. He swallowed. Lowered himself, legs first. There was a ladder, old iron, cold and damp beneath his hands. He descended. The space below wasn't a basement. Not exactly. Not finished. More of a crawl space, but too wide, too long. The floor was dirt, packed hard, the walls stone, sweating with condensation. A single naked bulb swung from a wire that had no visible source, casting frantic shadows that never stayed still. The smell was stronger here, earth and mildew, and something else underneath. A sweetness, curdled. Evan moved slowly, his footsteps muffled. Something scraped behind him. He spun. No one there. Just the walls. He turned back and stopped. Ahead on the far wall was a table. Metal. Rusted. On it, a reel-to-reel tape machine. Dustless. He didn't remember his father owning one. Didn't remember this room. But here it was. Undeniable. The tape was threaded, already in place. The machine hummed, waiting. He pressed play, static. Then a voice, garbled, familiar. His father. If you're hearing this, if you're here, it means you stayed too long. Evan's breath hitched. You'll want to keep going, but you can't trust what you see anymore, not even your own memories, especially those. A pause, breathing. One more left, son. One more before he wakes. The tape stopped. The silence that followed felt wrong, too thick. Evan turned to leave and saw something written on the wall behind the tape machine, scratched into the stone, deep and jagged. He waits in rooms you forgot. His hands trembled. Then he noticed something on the floor. A doll, old, ragged, stuffed with rice or sand. Its fabric was patched and worn thin, but its button eyes gleamed in the low light. He recognized it. It had been his. It shouldn't be here. It was buried with his mother. Evan backed away. He climbed the ladder too fast, feet slipping on the rungs. When he pulled the trapdoor shut above him, it latched on its own. The light flicked off behind him. Dark. Complete. As he stepped into the hallway, heart pounding, trying to regain his breath, he turned toward the mirror just outside the laundry room. It was fogged. But this time there was a message written in it. Don't stay awake. Chapter 5. Echoes Beneath. There was a smell in the basement that had no name. Not rot, not mildew, something colder, like breath trapped in stone. Evan felt it the moment he descended again, this time deliberately, each step a negotiation between dread and necessity. He told himself it was for answers, though part of him knew it was something older than that, something closer to memory than logic. The trapdoor shut behind him without touch. The space looked different now. No longer a crawl space. Wider, more symmetrical, less natural. The dirt floor had hardened into something smooth and dark, almost polished. Evan's footsteps echoed, not loudly, but enough to remind him he wasn't alone. The light still came from a single bulb, swinging softly, as if disturbed by breath or thought. He walked forward. To the left, a series of old wooden shelves bowed with the weight of reel-to-reel tapes, their labels barely legible beneath layers of dust and grime. Some had dates. Some had names. One simply read 6, another, door, a third, warnings. The last word reverberated in his mind like something spoken aloud. Warnings. His hands were cold as he reached for the box beside the reels, unmarked save for a single red fingerprint on the lid. He didn't open it. Not yet. He told himself he was waiting for the right moment, but truthfully, he was afraid. Not of what was inside, but of what it would confirm. He turned instead to the machine. It was already powered, though there were no visible wires. He threaded the tape labeled warnings through the reel, fingers trembling slightly. The machine clicked softly as if recognizing its task, then began to play. Static, not white noise. This was darker, deeper, like being submerged in black water and hearing voices through it. Then a child's voice, his own, flat, calm, matter of fact. If you hear this, it's already started again. That's okay. You just have to remember the order. A pause. They always come in 3s, except the last one. The last one knocks. Evan's breath hitched. The voice was wrong, not in pitch but in intention. It lacked fear. It lacked anything human. We lit the candles in room 217. They told us to, 1 for each chime. It's how we learn to stay awake during the knocking hour. The air around him shifted. Not wind, pressure. Something leaned in. Sometimes he came through the mirror. Sometimes through the bed frame. Once through the closet in the lobby. It doesn't matter. He always finds the last one. The voice changed, dropped suddenly into a whisper, panicked. We tried not to sleep. We tried. The tape screeched, then snapped. Evan recoiled, the machine clicking uselessly. He stared at the broken reel in silence, then slowly, too slowly, turned his head toward the box, unmarked, except for the fingerprint. He lifted the lid. Inside were photographs, dozens, black and white, faded at the edges. Each one showed a child standing in front of room 217. Different children, but always that room. Some smiled, others stared blankly, and one near the bottom, was of him. Not as he remembered himself. His eyes were closed, but not in sleep. His mouth was slightly open. The side of his face was bruised. The date on the back, August 15th, 1997. He dropped the photo. A sound rose in the distance, soft at first, like wind through pine needles, then louder, closer, a voice. Evan, whispered, but with precision. He backed away from the shelf, chest tight, ears ringing. His thoughts came in stutters. It wasn't real. None of this was real. He was grieving, sleep-deprived, motel air and old paint fumes, hallucinations. Still, his feet kept moving, backward, toward the ladder. The voice came again, nearer now. You left something open. He turned, fast, eyes scanning. The dark. Nothing. Just stone and shadow. But he heard it. A low, slow knock. Not from above. From behind the wall. He approached it slowly. It was darker there, the shadows deeper. The wall was smooth, wet. No seams, no crack. But the knock came again, 3 times, measured. He pressed his hand against the stone. It was warm. Then the chime, soft, distant, but present. Once, his breath caught. Twice. He turned toward the trapdoor above. 3 times. And then a pause, silence. 4. A fourth chime. It echoed through the stone like a scream held too long. Not just heard, felt, in bone, in breath. The real machine turned on by itself. A new voice emerged. His father. He doesn't sleep anymore. None of us do. Not since we let it in. But it's still hungry. You're the last one now, Evan. The door won't close until it's fed. The machine sparked, flared, and then went dead. Evan stumbled toward the ladder, hands gripping the rungs with urgency. As he pulled himself upward, the air around him pulsed, each breath of the motel a warning in and of itself. At the top, he shoved the trap door open and rolled out, chest heaving. The laundry room was silent, but the motel was not. The hallway hummed, mirrors fogged, and the clock in his room, still stuck at 11:59, and ticking. Chapter 6. Sleep-deprived. Evan had not slept in 42 hours. At least, that's what he believed. The hours had collapsed into one another like stacked chairs after a school play, messy, misaligned. Time had lost its logic, but not its rhythm. The chimes still came, like warnings, like footsteps approaching. He sat in room 217, hunched over the small wooden desk. His hands trembled as he wrote, again, something that had occurred to him only minutes before. Or maybe it was hours. He wasn't sure anymore. The edges of his thoughts had started to fray. Words didn't behave the way they used to. The journal was supposed to help, a measure of control. He told himself, write what's real, anchor it. He scrawled, I am awake, I am alone, the clock is watching. He paused, staring at the last line. That wasn't what he meant to write. He blinked. I am awake. I am alone. The knock is waiting. No, he hadn't written that. Had he? He rubbed. His eyes tried again. Slower. Clearer. I am still me. He looked away. Looked back. Am I still me? He slammed the book shut. The radio flickered to life again, unprompted. White noise, yes, but under it, buried just low enough to question. Laughter. Children? Maybe. Or something that used to be children. He unplugged the radio. The noise continued for 2 more seconds. Then silence. The mirror across the room fogged slowly, as if exhaling. He didn't look at it. Shahai's that afternoon, if it was still afternoon, he left the motel. His body felt like a borrowed suit, sleeves too long, shoes too tight. His thoughts drifted, slow and uncooperative. He walked into town, hoping the cold air might anchor him. It didn't. If anything, the world outside felt thinner, like the boundaries between things were weakening. Even the colors had changed. The sky was the wrong shade of gray. The trees looked less like trees and more like crude drawings of trees. Shadows formed without objects to cast them. He made it to the library, somehow. It was nearly empty inside, just dust motes and humming lights. A woman sat behind the main desk, gray hair pulled tight, glasses sliding halfway down her nose. He asked about records, anything about the motel, its history, ownership, accidents. She didn't look up. Her voice was dry, like sand being poured into a paper bag. It wasn't always a motel. Evan leaned. Closer. What was it? Sanatorium. Not officially, but that's what people called it. She tapped a file folder on the counter. Used to house women with postpartum psychosis. Wayward girls. Some men, too. Your mother was here once. He stopped breathing. That's not possible. The woman finally looked at him. You didn't know. Her face was without malice or empathy, just expressionless fact. They called it resting rooms back then. A euphemism. Your father had her. Committed quietly. No trial. No paperwork. Evan felt the floor shift under him. A slow, seesawing motion. No, she wasn't sick. She disappeared. The librarian shrugged. People do that, especially in Hollow. He left without saying goodbye. Outside, the wind had changed direction. It moved in jerks, like breath held too long and then released all at once. Back at the motel, the hallway was darker than usual. The lights flickered, not the chaotic random flicker of a bad bulb, but timed, deliberate, like a signal. 1, 2, pause, 3, 4, pause, 5. The fifth flicker aligned with the first chime. Evan stood still in the corridor. His heart ticked, slower than the second hand, slower than the sound from room 217. Second chime. He walked forward, not toward the room, toward the mirror. The fog had returned. This time it wasn't just a breath print. Letters. Stay. Then they smeared, rearranged themselves. Was. Another smear. Stare. He turned. Behind him, the stairwell to the second floor, the one he had just climbed, was gone. In its place, a blank wall. Chime. 3. He backed into room 217. The air inside felt denser, like he was stepping into an unlit aquarium. He turned on the lamp. It hummed softly. The clock said 11:59. Ticking. Still. His journal lay open on the desk. Words he didn't remember writing filled the page. You were here before. Still are sleeping is just remembering backwards. He touched the page. It was damp. Not with water. Ink. Blood. He flipped back a few pages. Blank. Flipped forward. More writing. Don't sleep past the 5th. He comes after the forgetting. Evan sat on the edge of the bed. His spine ached. His skin felt too tight. The room swayed gently, like a boat drifting towards something it didn't want to meet. Chime. 4. The bulb in the lamp popped. Darkness bloomed in the corners. The shadows seemed to crawl outward, from the closet, the mirror, the space beneath the bed, and then deep beneath the ticking of the clock, a whisper, not a word, a name. Evan, drawn out, like a breath exhaled for the first time. He froze. Chime. 5. It was a different sound this time, not mechanical, not metal, organic, like something deep inside the motel had stirred, like the place had been woken up, the mirror fogged again, without breath, without reason, and then etched slowly, stroke by stroke, as if being carved. You're still here. Evan turned to the bed. Something was beneath the coverlet, a shape, rising, breathing. The covers undulated gently, like wind across a shallow grave. He couldn't move. The journal lay open in his lap. A new sentence appeared at the bottom of the page. Look under. Chapter 7. The Others Who Heard. Evan didn't remember falling asleep, only waking up and realizing he shouldn't have. The 5th chime had rung. Something had changed, not dramatically, subtly. The world felt more present, like it was leaning closer to him now, lips parting, about to whisper something terrible. He hadn't looked under the covers. He had intended to. He had reached, hand trembling, fingertips grazing the edge of the blanket. But then there had been a sound, a thud, distant but unmistakable. Not within the room. Somewhere deeper. Beneath. He left the room instead. It was late morning now, or what passed for it in Grayer's Hollow. Evan moved through the town in a slow, listless way, like someone walking through an unfamiliar dream that kept insisting it was real, Each step he took was like pressing on a bruise. Everyone he passed looked at him, but quickly looked away. Or maybe they had always been looking and he'd only just noticed. He had a list. Names, mostly. Old motel employees, the few who had lasted long enough to matter. Former maids, maintenance workers, a night manager named Coulson. His father had kept a log of payroll in the desk drawer. Evan had found it around 4 a.m., when he could no longer bear the weight of the silence inside the walls. The first name on the list, Shelley Hobbins. She used to clean the second floor. He remembered her vaguely. A round woman with a limp and thick glasses. She'd once given him a candy when he fell off his bike. The address in the log pointed to a weather-worn duplex on the edge of town. He knocked twice. No answer. The third knock echoed. He leaned in. The air near the door smelled sweet, like something gone to rot behind plastic. When he cupped his ear to the door, he heard the faint sound of a TV playing static. He never saw Shelley. The second name, Roy Coulson. The night manager. A man who had once told Evan bedtime stories when his father worked late. Evan found his number online, an old listing, landline only. He called from the payphone outside the diner. The phone rang 4 times, then clicked. A man's voice answered, brittle and dry. I told them I wouldn't talk about it anymore. Evan's voice cracked. Roy, it's Evan. Bryce. A pause. A long, slow inhale. 5th sleeper. I told them one was missing. What does that mean? It doesn't want you awake. Click. The line went dead. When Evan dialed again, the number was disconnected. He wandered into the Grayers Hollow Library again. The air inside smelled of warm paper and something chemical. Floor wax, maybe. A different woman was behind the desk this time. Younger, smiling too wide. He asked about obituaries, back issues, local history. She gave him a box without comment. He sifted through clippings. Yellowed, brittle. Local headlines. Town fair cancelled after fire. Woman claims shadow and mirror took child. We heard him knocking, say teachers at Grayer School. And then Evan Bryce, age 6, found dead in motel fire. He stared at the headline. No. His hands trembled as he lifted the article. There was a photo. Blurred. Grainy. The boy in the picture had the same eyes, same hair, but something off, as if someone had tried to remember him from a dream. He flipped the clipping over, a handwritten note on the back in red ink. Not buried. He closed the box and left the library without speaking. Back at Hollow Haven, the world felt thinner. The building itself seemed to sag, as if exhausted from holding in secrets. The hallway carpet felt damp beneath his shoes. Room 217 stood silent. He hesitated, then stepped inside. The air was different, burnt. It hit him immediately. Char, ash, something acrid in the back of his throat. The curtains were untouched, the bed undisturbed, but the air carried. The unmistakable scent of something scorched. He looked down, and there it was, on the floorboards beside the desk. The drawing, the same one he had pulled from the wall earlier. The motel, the stick-figure family, the shadow. Only now it was burned into the floor, not drawn, branded. Charred lines formed the crude shapes, dark, jagged, still smoldering faintly at the edges, like the fire had only just gone out. The stick figures were gone now. In their place, 5 circles. 4 crossed out. Only one remained untouched. Beside it, his name, Evan. He knelt to touch it, but stopped. The floor was warm. There was no smoke. No damage elsewhere in the room. Only this. as if the drawing had surfaced from beneath the boards, like it had always been there, waiting to rise. The silence was total. Then, behind him, the mirror fogged. He didn't turn right away. His muscles refused. When he finally looked, there were two handprints, side by side, small, familiar, and below them, scrawled as if in a child's finger, "Who did you replace?" Evan backed toward the door. The air thickened. He heard a soft sound behind the wall. Scratching. Not the deliberate kind from before. This was frantic, urgent, like something trying to dig out. Chapter 8. Who wakes the dreamer? The world had folded in on itself. That's how it felt to Evan, like the edges had curled inward, like the building, the town. Maybe even time itself had become recursive, self-consuming. Room 217 was no longer a room but a point of gravity, a core. He found himself drawn to it, even when standing outside it, even when he knew there was something just behind the door, waiting to be let out, or let in. Reality, or what passed for it, had softened. Evan no longer trusted mirrors. They didn't reflect, not truly. They observed. He caught glimpses of himself, but younger, 6, maybe 7, flashes of a smaller body, bowl-cut hair, striped shirt, standing in corners just out of reach, appearing where no door had opened, where no feet had walked. Sometimes the boy stared at him. Other times he seemed to stare through. Always with those hollow eyes, deep wells that didn't shine but drained. Once Evan turned away from the bathroom mirror and saw the boy in the reflection still looking at him, unmoving. When he spun around, the boy was gone. The mirror remained fogged for hours. He tried to leave, twice. The first time, he packed a small bag, keys in hand, coat zipped. The sun had dipped below the trees. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. He walked and walked past room 215, room 213, room 211, but room 217 kept reappearing. The numbers shifted behind his back. The second time, he made it outside, or so he thought. But the parking lot was wrong, the rental car missing. The motel looped behind him, again, like a rotating stage set, rotating faster each time he blinked. He reached the road and found it led back to the porch. Eventually, he stopped trying. The phones were dead. The cell, still dark. The landline in the office produced only static now, or sometimes a faint hum that pulsed like a heartbeat. Once, when he listened long enough, the hum formed words. Very soft. You were always the last. He discovered the final tape in the back of the filing cabinet. It had no label. The metal reel was cool to the touch, slick with dust. It smelled faintly of smoke and old paper. He didn't thread it right away. He stared at it for almost an hour, sitting at the desk in the motel's office, the tape like a coiled question in his palm. When he finally fed it through the machine, it hesitated, stuttered. Then it played. His father's voice emerged, broken, weeping, not like a man crying out of guilt, not even out of grief. This was a cry from someone who had seen something he shouldn't have, something he couldn't ever forget. I rang the bell. I had to. I couldn't stop it. A cough. Wet. Choked. He made me. I saw you sleep. I thought it would keep you safe. I was wrong. Silence. Then a knock. Recorded. Slow. Rhythmic. Then the tape cut out. Evan sat frozen. The room around him pressed inward. And then the knock came again. Real this time. Room 217. 3 knocks. Measured. Soft but deliberate. He rose. The hallway was silent. No lights flickered. No doors creaked. It was as if the motel itself was holding its breath. He walked toward the room. Each step felt like walking through syrup, slow, resistant. His legs no longer obeyed his brain fully, a delay between thought and action. He reached the door. It was closed, perfectly. The wood smooth, unblemished, as if no one had ever touched it. He pressed his ear to it. Nothing. No sound. Then, another knock. Not from the hallway side. From within. 3 times. Evan pulled his head back. The handle turned on its own, just slightly, inviting. He didn't go in. Not yet. Instead, he backed away, turned, started down the hallway. But the floor had changed beneath his feet. He looked down and saw the burned drawing again. Not just once, multiple times, repeating, spaced evenly down the corridor, like a pattern or a warning. The figures now gone entirely, only the crossed-out circles remaining, all except one, his, and beside it, newly added, "Wake him." He looked up. The boy, the other Evan, stood at the far end of the hall, same striped shirt, same black eyes. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stood, swaying faintly. Evan blinked. The boy was gone. The office had no clock, but Evan felt the time inside him. It was almost always 11:59 now, no matter what the light looked like, no matter when he tried to measure it. 1 minute before, the dream's edge. He sat down in the lobby chair. The old leather cracked beneath him. He stared out the dusty window. Then, in the reflection, he saw it. The boy. Again, but this time not alone. His mother, standing behind him, her mouth unmoving, her hand on his shoulder. Evan turned. No one there, but her scent lingered. The faint perfume he remembered from childhood, lavender, something herbal, almost bitter. It sank into the walls. He looked at the mirror. His own reflection stared back, wrong. His eyes, empty. A knock. Louder now, room 217. And then, a voice, inside his head, or the mirror, or both. Who wakes the dreamer, Evan? Who do you become when he does? The door to room 217 creaked open, just a crack. And the light inside read, Chapter 9. 6 bells. The door to room 217 was open now, but what waited beyond it wasn't a room. It was something else. Not a hallucination, not a dream, but a held memory, suspended and breathing, as if the motel had been keeping it sealed, fermenting it just beneath the surface of reality until Evan returned. Until he was ready, or until he wasn't. The red light inside the room did not come from any lamp or bulb. It was ambient, blood-like, as if the very air had taken on color. Evan stepped through the threshold, slowly, almost reverently. The door eased shut behind him, not a slam, not a snap, but a gentle finality, the way one might close a music box before the final note. His first thought was, this is exactly how I left it. But that wasn't true, because he had never left. Not really. And the room, it had been waiting. The bed was the same, patterned coverlet, sagging center, but now someone sat upon it, a shape, a figure, a woman hunched forward, cradling something in her arms. She rocked gently, side to side. The motion was too smooth to be casual. It was ritual, intentional, a pattern with meaning only she could understand. Evan stopped in the middle of the room, just beside the dresser. His feet refused to go further. The floor beneath him pulsed, not visibly but in sensation. A heartbeat he couldn't place. The woman raised her head. His mother, younger than she should be, eyes sunken, skin gray at the edges. But it was her, or something close. Her face was calm, even peaceful. Her smile was wrong, not in shape, but in context, like a face remembering how to imitate comfort. "You're early," she said. Her voice was soft, tired, like it had been singing for hours and just stopped. Evan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. She continued rocking. The bundle in her arms shifted slightly. It was wrapped in old fabric. Linen, maybe. But black-spotted, water-damaged, mold blooming at the edges like bruises. Whatever it held was small, child-sized. "We tried to keep it from you," she said, stroking the edge of the fabric. Her fingers moved too slowly, carefully, as though the bundle might fall apart. "But you kept waking up in pieces." Evan took a breath that didn't feel like his. "What is this?" he asked. "You know." The room seemed to lean in around them. The corners bowed inward. The walls flexed like muscle. The air was thicker now, warm, heavy, humid. Breathing became an effort. Evan stepped forward. The bundle shifted again, a soft weight pressing against her arms. "I died," he whispered. His mother looked up. Her smile didn't change. "You never left." Something in him wanted to laugh, scream, run, all at once. Instead, he moved closer to the bed, each step slower than the last. He was afraid of what he might see, of what the bundle might be. But more than that, he was afraid of what it might remember. His mother's voice softened further, almost inaudible. "They buried a name, not a body." He stopped beside her. The bundle now just inches away. He reached for it. Chime. The first one hit like a jolt through the floorboards. Chime. The second made the mirror shudder. Chime. The third turned the walls darker, blood seeping into the wallpaper like ink in water. Chime. The fourth came from beneath the bed. Chime. The fifth came from within the bundle. Evan froze. His mother's smile faded. She looked at him, truly looked, for the first time. "You weren't supposed to remember this part." And then, chime. 6. The sound was not a sound. It was a tearing, a rift. The air fractured. The ceiling buckled, and a black, writhing shadow bled down its center like a clot, bursting. It wasn't a presence. It was a subtraction. A place where light refused to exist. Evan stumbled back, hands over his ears, though the sound was inside him now, vibrating in his bones, screaming through his blood. His mother stood slowly, the bundle still in her arms. She walked toward him. The fabric of the room warped behind her. Pictures slid off the walls. The clock above the bed twisted like wet clay, its face melting into unreadable time. She stopped inches from him. "You screamed just like this the first time." Evan opened his mouth and screamed, but the voice that came out wasn't his. It was higher, smaller, a child's voice, wailing, lost, terrified. He fell to his knees, clutching his chest. The world spiraled inward. The floor peeled back, revealing black beneath black. The sixth chime echoed still, endless. He looked up. His mother had unwrapped the bundle. Inside, a mirror, small, oval, cracked, and in it, the boy, staring, smiling. Chapter 10, 7th hour. There was smoke, or maybe there wasn't. There were walls, then fire, then nothing. Evan wasn't sure if he ran or if he stayed, or if the motel simply folded itself into ash around him like a magician's collapsing tent. There were screams, his, others, a bell, or a clock, or both. But the time had stopped meaning anything. The hands on the clock spun and spun until they disappeared. until there was only the sound, a ticking, familiar, foundational, like a heartbeat that refused to die. Then, nothing. Darkness not as absence, but as presence. When he opened his eyes, everything was white. Clean white, sterile white, bleached beyond intention. The ceiling above him buzzed faintly with fluorescent tubes, and the hum felt intimate, as if it had been waiting with him. The light was not comforting. It never was. It was too bright, too artificial. It reminded him of being observed. A nurse walked past the open door, clipboard in hand. She didn't look at him. Her shoes squeaked rhythmically down the hallway. He turned his head, a plastic wristband wrapped around his arm. He had to squint to read it. Patient name, Bryce, Nathaniel E. Not Evan. Nathaniel. He blinked, looked again. Still Nathaniel. He touched the letters slowly, wondering if they'd come off like dry paint. They didn't. The room was small, institutional, a single bed bolted to the floor, a window that didn't open, a chair in the corner, a wall clock above the door, plain, white, silent. He sat up. His body felt used, as though someone else had borrowed it and returned it slightly off. His muscles ached in the wrong places. On the bedside table was a notebook, unmarked. He opened it. Empty. Except for one sentence on the first page, written in block letters. The 7th hour is for waking. He didn't remember writing it, but he knew it was his. The sound came then. Tick. A single tick. He looked up. The clock on the wall had begun to move, but he hadn't heard it before. He was sure of that. Tick. The second hand stuttered forward again. 6:58. He stood, walked to the mirror beside the sink, looked at himself. He didn't look like he'd expected. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken. Not unfamiliar, just displaced, like he'd aged in a place where time had no logic. He leaned closer. The mirror fogged, just slightly. A breath. His own? Or someone else's? He stepped back. A memory flickered behind his eyes. The hallway, the drawing, the boy. His mother with that bundle in her arms, the 6th chime. He shouldn't remember any of it. The doctors would say so. If he asked. But he did. Every sound, every shadow, every crack in the motel's walls, especially the knock. Later, a nurse brought food. She called him Nathan. She asked him if he knew where he was. He said yes. She asked him if he remembered why he was here. He said no. She smiled like that answer pleased her more. Progress, she said, and left. But she'd left the door slightly ajar. He watched it for a long time, just in case. The notebook beckoned. He flipped to the next page. Blank. But when he pressed the pen down, his hand moved with familiarity, as though it were transcribing a message from some hidden place inside him. The rooms shifted. The boy was me. The bed was a door. He stared at the words. Then, slowly, more emerged beneath them, like invisible ink developing in the light. 7 chimes. 1 escape. He turned to the clock. 6:59. He stood again. The air felt thinner. The light overhead buzzed louder. His own breath began to echo. He placed a hand against the wall. It was warm, like it had been in the basement, like it was alive. He sat on the edge of the bed and waited. Tick, tick. The second hand crawled toward the top. Tick. His heart slowed. Tick. 7 o'clock. Chime. A deep sound, not mechanical. Organic, like a chest exhaling after years of stillness. Chime. Again. The light flickered. The mirror across the room fogged, fully this time. Chime. 3. A knock at the door. Not loud, just certain. Chime. 4. His name, not Nathaniel, Evan, whispered from behind the mirror. Chime. 5. He stood. Chime. 6. The clock hands stopped moving, but the ticking continued. One more chime to come. 7. Not a sound, but a feeling. A break in reality, like the thin crust of a dream snapping open. The mirror cracked down the center, and in its reflection he wasn't alone anymore.